Hello, everyone. This is Jamie Flinchbaugh of the People Solve Problems podcast. I'm here with Josh Ehrig. Josh, good to see you.
See you, Jamie.
So, thanks for coming on. Just by way of introduction, Professor Joshua Ehrig is a professor of practice with a lot of work in entrepreneurship at Lehigh University. He's a thought leader in a whole lot of things from business model innovation, entrepreneurship, corporate innovation, new venture creation, business strategy, leadership, and technology management. So you get to play in a lot of different overlapping and intersecting domains, but certainly some interesting things to play with as a professor. So yeah, let's jump into all of those things, all of those topics from entrepreneurship to innovation. All of them are versions of problem solving, right? So how do you explore different problem solving techniques, experiment with them, integrate them, adopt them? How do you play in the problem solving methodology sandbox?
Yeah, so it's a great question to get started, Jamie. And one area that is more of a avocation than a vocation is around life design
Hmm.
innovation. And People Solve Problems is the title of your book, and one that I recommend everyone read. And so I actually think it starts with the individual. I think it starts with you. Uh, I think, if you think about it, we all have kind of surface and deep level insecurities that we wrestle with. We come from different backgrounds, right? We have experiences that, we react differently to, right? I mean, if I'm, coming from the engineering school or the arts or the science or even the business disciplines, we tend to kind of react and respond and approach things and develop and execute on processes in a different and unique way. And sometimes coming together can be very challenging. So I feel like we kind of project all these kind of experiences, backgrounds, insecurities, and I think we project it into our team, right, our organization, and I think sometimes this gets in the way of like actionable problem solving, right? Because I think there's problem solving and then there's actionable problem solving. So I think it actually starts with self-awareness, because we talk a lot about teams, organization, culture, leadership, but I think it starts with self-awareness with you, because without this self-awareness, you'll enable your projections to manifest itself onto your team, your culture, your relationship to whatever the external kind of stimuli is, right?
Mhm.
And I guess I view this contextually, right? I always, as I've told you before, I will have like an image of a Rolodex, and most folks in Gen Z don't know what a Rolodex is, right? And
Right.
there is one in the Smithsonian, by the way. Um, but and then I'll say it's a Rolodex, and I think one of the students said, "Is that an expensive watch?" Right? And, and it's interesting because contextually, myself and them are in very different places, but yet we can learn from one another quite a bit. But I think having that, not only that awareness, self-awareness, but that awareness of other people's kind of contextual framework and where they're at, I think is really, really hard. And I don't think it's probably practiced as much as it should be, right? I think it can be also circumstantial, right? Which can be confusing, or situational, right?
Mhm.
So, where we're kind of just quick to act, right? Kind of the proverbial kind of, putting out fires, right? And I think all this can kind of cause us to lack empathy at the end of the day. And I guess to me, that's kind of where I'm going, into this is that you kind of have this reactive state of, maybe it's a projection of all these things we spoke about, or it's a proactive state. Hey, we've got a problem that we need to solve that, depending on which horizon you're playing on, could be really important, systemic to the company, or just a small kind of, we need to make this small change with the value proposition, with our existing customer segment. And so I think without this empathy, it's really hard to understand and accurately define what this root problem is. Right.
Yeah, it's
So
really, really interesting. So first I'm imagining wearing a Rolodex on my wrist, and how awkward that would be. But first of all, I love the phrase actionable problem solving, because there's plenty of problem solving activity, right, that doesn't produce anything actionable. But really talking about the psychology, the biases that we have, the self-awareness that we need, the empathy to get to where you concluded. Um, there's obviously different types of problems, right? Some, like I'm working on a scheduling problem right now, and a computer problem, and I don't know how much empathy and self-awareness are needed there. But when you're talking about business model innovation or entrepreneurship or corporate innovation, and period, um, what goes wrong or what goes right with empathy as the key ingredient in those domains?
yeah, so there's a lot going on there to unpackage. So one of the things that I notice either within an entrepreneurial or an intrapreneurial, environment is that a lot of us throughout our learnings, right, whether it's in formal education or even informally, there's usually a solution, right? Like the solution is 4, and 2 plus 2 gets to 4.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an exact outcome, there is an exact answer. And I think this is what's really hard about entrepreneurship in general, is that there's no answer called 4, right?
Right.
There's a process to get to that, but there's no definitive final outcome. And so there's a lot of adaptation and pivoting and iterating that gets you there, right? But that's really, really hard to do. But to your question about empathy and how do we effectively get there, right? I think all too often we already define what the problem is, right? So assuming we've kind of gone through the self-awareness, then it's around the discovery of, like, what is the actual problem? And you just assume what the problem is, right? And I think if I remember from my own readings with you is, there's this intuitive integration, right? That kind of goes into that. But so self-awareness is, I think you need self-awareness to have empathy. And then you need empathy to effectively define the problem, right? So kind of going through that design thinking methodology. And I think only then, once you define the problem, is to understand that problem is fluid, right? It's dynamic, it's ever evolving, it's constantly changing, and then the problem or the opportunity, if you're looking at it from an entrepreneur's perspective, is that these solutions to these problems create new problems.
Yeah.
Right. And then they have these kind of unintended consequences involved, right? And these unintended consequences could be around culture, team dynamics, business model components.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, once again, they're minor. Sometimes they're structural. If you and I were running a mom and pop shop in downtown New York, right, or some other, small town America, when Model Ts were starting to get mass produced, you were like, great, that's going to get our customers to our shop that much faster. But there was so many unintended consequences of that Model T, right? Whether it was, the way we ate with fast food, the way we shopped with big box stores, the way we lived with suburban, Levittown, et cetera. And it has such a fundamental change, right, into that. So I think, but that kind of lies in the opportunity, but this is why, having a continuous feedback loop around this is so important.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you create these solutions, but they create new problems. And if you're not constantly understanding and evolving from that, I don't think you ever truly become a sustainable problem solver, right?
Right.
So I think actionable is one part of the equation. I think sustainable is another part, right? And
Yeah.
just to just to go back real quick, I think the reason why I emphasize self-awareness is because I think without the self-awareness, you can't be authentic.
Mhm.
And without being authentic, I don't know how you can lead a team in terms of, being able to effectively problem solve.
Right. Yeah.
Everyone's got their definition of problem solving, but to be effective in it is different.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, we all problem solve as human beings. We problem solve. So it's just a matter of when and where and what it looks like and what we bring to the table. Picking up on empathy and using cars, since we brought up the Model T. I remember meeting with a particular German automaker, and they were getting bad feedback on their computer system in their JD Power scores, and people were confused. They couldn't understand their work, and they said, 30-minute lesson at the dealership, and they can learn how to use it. And it was kind of like nobody wants to spend 30 minutes at the dealership learning how to use their computer. They don't even want to spend 30 minutes buying the car. So it was sort of a lack of empathy moment of not really understanding how the customer saw that. Now, just to that point of understanding the problem you're trying to solve and empathy, um, you've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs. Um, do you need to be empathetic as a human being, or can you learn to be empathetic in your problem solving as a practiced trait as opposed to a natural trait?
Yeah, so there's a lot of potential answers there to that one. The one that I still go back to is that I think you need to be I think you need to be empathetic in the sense of being empathetic to yourself.
Hmm.
Because without being empathetic to yourself, you can't be empathetic to others. And if you can't be empathetic to others, right? And this could be internal or external, right? I don't know if we've defined what problem actually means, because in the last example, problem was external to the customer,
Right.
right? And without discovery efforts and truly understanding the comfort or the problems and the issues that they have, you can't effectively solve them.
Yep.
As compared to internal, right? Whether it's process or team or culture or leadership or whatever it might be. But I think having that empathy towards yourself is crucial to either internal or external problem solving.
Yeah.
Because I think all too often, and I'll take a tie into entrepreneurship, is that they define what the problem is like right away, right? And generally you know it's with blinders
Yes.
because like I'm experiencing this, right? But being a market of one is not the best market to be in. And so I think even if you believe, you assume, right? Because I think defining problems is around assumptions,
Hmm.
right? This is where validated learning, I think, is so important too, and actually mapping those assumptions. But you know, I think creating a list of once you've kind of gone through discovering empathy and really defining the problem, I think is probably something that not a lot of people do, and I'm sure I've been guilty of that myself. I assume I know what you're going to say, so I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say next.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the best way to look at a situation in a conversation. I think that's analogous to, defining problems as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, defining the problem, right, especially when you're trying to be innovative, whether as an entrepreneur, um, if you don't get that right, and if you lock it down too early, you can be in real trouble. Um, but especially in corporate innovation, right, you need some proof, some evidence before you get the green light to start marching forward. And if you're an entrepreneur, you need to give yourself the green light, or you need to raise money or convince a co-founder to move forward. So how do you both I'll say, I'll define it this way, and you can redefine it for me if I get it wrong. Convey confidence that we understand where we're going into this messy world of innovation and entrepreneurship with a well-defined problem, yet at the same time, hold it loosely and be ready to change with that constant feedback.
Yeah, so assuming we know the definition of the problem, right? I'm a big fan. I think certain frameworks work really well in this situation. I'm a fan of McKinsey's Three Horizons framework, and
Okay.
sometimes I'll put some business model stuff into that. Because I think a lot of people, they have the problem, they define the problem, and then they're automatically go to the solution, right? And it depends on where you're operating, right? Are you going, towards sustaining, existing operations? Is it an emerging market situation, or is it a transformative, dare I say, blue ocean situation? And and a lot of people that, and that last one would be an example of Horizon 3. But a lot of folks, when they're in that Horizon 3, they're kind of like, well, I'm going to do a DCF model, discounted cash flow model, and assume that my business model is linear over the next 10 years. And, and we know that not to be true. And I think, to your point, measuring what success versus failure is really hard, in that respect. So I'm actually a big fan of, even if you're going towards a Horizon 2, which is emerging, or Horizon 3, which would be transformative, I like creating deceptive ones. Like, what can you do within your, and I've said this in a few workshops, what can you do almost, I don't want to say secretively, right? Because this is being recorded, so the secret will be out, but you almost do secretively to kind of marry the reactive and the proactive state, right? Where reactive might be sitting in a Horizon 1, sustaining core business. Maybe you're trying to extend the S curve, but maybe you're just trying to do something within process product innovation at a one level. And so I'll say, what can you do there, and what, core competencies can you leverage there that can create the kernel and start validating certain assumptions that can ultimately get you to that vision, that Horizon 3 strategy. And all, because the reality is that, companies may spend, I don't know, I mean, there's a recommended amount of, percentage that you should allocate towards that portfolio, right? Between 1, 2, and 3. But, when it comes down to it, maybe 2% is allocated to a transformative strategy.
Right.
And but I think if you can create a deceptive one, you not only are addressing immediate or proactive or reactive problems, but you're also starting to address proactive problems by validating assumptions. And I'm an absolute, and I believe you are as well, a big fan of validated learning. And how can we start, kind of doing that build, measure, learn approach to that, right? And creating feedback loops. Because if you go into, if you have a kind of audacious problem where, there's no real KPIs associated with it, right? I mean, you don't know, right? And I do appreciate what Osterwalder came up with, AKIs, right? Which are aspirations and key insights. And I believe, we're so KPI driven sometimes that, you can almost play the KPI game at the one level, but you're also validating certain assumptions at an AKI level for your ultimate goal of being in a transformative 3 position.
Right.
Hope that's not too many acronyms or numbers there, but
You explained them as you went. So, yeah, KPIs work best when you already know some of your answers, right? But some of this you don't know your answers. I like that idea of deceptive ones. It kind of reminds me of a phrase we used when I was a soccer coach, which is the game is the best teacher. Don't spend a lot of time learning, we're going to set up cones and dribble. Just put people on a field and start playing, and you'll learn a lot by moving through those different phases as you progress. Now you try to do this with your students as well. So whether they're a student of yours or they just want to learn how to get better at this before they venture into entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship. How do you get to experience that before you're ready to make the leap? How do you practice that in the classroom?
Yeah, so I think everything I do is learn by doing. I'm completely. I love your soccer metaphor. First and foremost. So at the undergrad level, they have to go out there day one, and start talking to folks, right? And doing discovery, which goes into empathy, and I also, they also do some self-awareness stuff along the way too. And so there's a lot of really great life skills that get unpackaged, because I think regardless of whether you want to go into entrepreneurship or not, there are so many skill and mindsets associated with it that can be helpful regardless of what you do. Now, I also work with graduate students. I work with MBA students, and they had to, for the capstone course that I just finished, they had to actively create a project where they had to identify a problem, develop it, and provide some kind of implementation plan, but then address why them and what's sustainable, what creates a sustainable competitive advantage for their organization. And they actively started doing discovery internally.
Yeah.
And started learning quite a bit, right? Because everything's interconnected, and something that we talk about with the business model is that if you impact, if you change one key activity, it could not only fundamentally change the product development side, but could also fundamentally change the value proposition and everything on the customer development side as well. And so it challenged a lot of them to start working cross-functionally, which I also think is a huge aspect to problem solving as well. And but it also enabled them to actually understand what the problems of the organization are. Because we talk about people solving problems, but I don't know if folks always know which ones are the right ones, or that they're even empowered to be
Right.
the ones thinking about themselves as problem solvers, because they operate in that functional sandbox or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I really think that everyone in the organization, or every student in the classroom for that matter, is a problem solver. And they have to be. I mean, you talk about AI or automation or all these different things that are occurring right now, and your ability to communicate and be a problem solver and lead, right, through not only through authenticity but curiosity, I think are going to be extremely important. I mean, if I'm a comp sci major, but I can put all the code into Chat GPT, I better be thinking about those other skill sets.
Yes.
While still understanding in the process.
Yep.
And
Fully
so,
agree. I think problem solving might be easier, but the hard parts will be even more important in all of that. So, well, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing your insights with our listeners. If you want to learn more from Josh, if you're looking for an undergraduate school or graduate school, you got to go to Lehigh. But if you're inside a company, he also does corporate workshops as well. So plenty of opportunities to learn from Professor Ehrig. So Josh, thanks for coming on.
thank you, Jamie. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for listening to the People Solve Problems podcast. Let's keep the conversation going. Visit jflinch.com for more episodes and other content. And continue to join us on your podcast app, of course. We greatly appreciate your feedback through reviews and ratings. Consider expanding your understanding of problem solving with Jamie's book, People Solve Problems: The Power of Every Person, Every Day, Every Problem. Available on Amazon. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and solving problems.